Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. So today's agenda is, as you see it, it's provides some feedback on a couple of items to the committees, which are relatively quick. With your understanding, we'll just proceed through if that's okay. So the first discussion point was about the agenda item, current conversations, and the committee asked us to go back and get some legal counsel on the use of such an agenda item. So that's what we did. Marge has followed up with Shipman and Goodwin. You can see what's commented on there. Marge, do you want to comment or do you want me to comment and say there? Okay, all right. So essentially, the advice from legal counsel is it's too wide open a topic essentially, and leaves the committee and the board open to FOI violations too much. The basic sense was, you want to put something on an agenda, be very specific about it in our policies, and included the policy for the subcommittee in the materials here. If we want to put something on agenda, you can always go through the board chair, you can or the committee chair, put it on and have a discussion about it. But it seems fairly clear that this is not a practice that we should probably consider, just given the exposure that it has.
Mm-hmm. Was interesting. I thought I expected there was a little more wiggle room in there. So this was good learning for me, lesson learned. So thank you for checking on it. To confirm the policy 9340 about construction and posting of agenda, does it operate the same way for a committee chair when you're talking about a committee agenda versus the board chair when you're talking about a full board agenda?
I would say so.
Okay.
In terms of going through this committee here, yes. And in terms of, the continual collaboration that you have with the board chair anyway,
Right.
That would continue, but yes, it goes through you as the board chair, as the committee chair here, if you want to put something on the agenda.
Okay.
So we could call it current conversations and put the specific item that we're gonna be.
Right. Current
Conversation.
conversations, wearing purple on Thursdays.
Yes, exactly. Okay, good.
I went with an
Agreed.
inane example.
I thought it was wear pink on Wednesdays.
Oh, Dennis, we can't discuss it. Wasn't warned. Anybody else have questions or comments on that? Thank you.
Thanks for keeping us out of trouble.
Yeah. Draft communications.
Yeah,
plan?
I'll just continue to go through it. That's fine. So if you turn back to I think the last page. So we reviewed this, and we have a Google Doc. We listed, if you look at the left-hand side, it says source location. That's a new field right there. So we listed that just simply that we would list the site of words just for organizational purposes, at least for now. It'll help us with it. So if we listed the Board of Education, it's not technically site, but it is here. Central Services, the 7 schools, Fitch, as sort of selection fields, and that would help us do what it did here. If we had 300 communications here, people can populate this, and then we can organize it by site or any of the other fields. But we just felt that would help us just in collecting the actual data. There was another field that I currently have in here, and it was included in the memorandum. It was called community. And what I meant by that is there are some communications that do go out, but it may be that we eliminate the community. I don't have it on this. If the worksheet doesn't show it here, but it's in the memorandum. Perhaps there are some community conversation or community things that go out maybe from a PTO, but we could include that in. For instance, I'll just make this up. The location was DHS, and the message source was a PTO.
DHSPA.
Right. And so I think we'll take off the community as a larger field. I'm not thinking we're going to send this out to the community for them to populate what they're doing, what they're communicating. Right. So I think I'll just reduce that. This is fairly straightforward. I think we're ready to go now with, don't read into anything that's on this. This is simply what was on before. And we're ready to send this out after the break. And I don't think we should talk about it at the March one, because I think we need a wee bit of time to clean it up and present it accordingly. So my suggestion was we'll send this out, if it's okay with the board, after the February break, and we'll discuss it at our April meeting.
Okay.
And we'll send it out with directions. It'll give us a wee bit of a time to meet with our administrators to talk about, this is exactly what we're talking about now. Would you put this in or would you put that in?
Right. Questions?
So this is the starting draft
Yes.
and, you know, if board members or administrative members come up with new ideas, we're going to build on this.
Correct. And it'll be sent to the board, like, I'd like the board to populate. I just put 2 examples down, but I'd like the board to populate.
Absolutely. Okay, good.
Are we thinking that we'll ask community partners to populate also?
No, that's what I'm saying in terms
Okay.
of, I'm actually thinking since first thinking about this, that I would recommend we drop the community partners as unless the board wants me to collect all what they are doing, there's no end to this. If something goes out from the school from a community partner, then we have the wherewithal here to drop down middle school, the sources, PTO, and we'll list it because it's coming from the source of a school site. But I don't know where we start and end. I'll take it under your counsel here, but it'd be my thought that we stick at the moment to what our communications are coming from our locations.
I think to start there, that makes sense. I think we're going to find that we have a lot being populated here and a lot to work with. I might want to leave that door open to getting input from some organizations, again, with the thinking that these are the messages that our parent community are receiving, and just to have kind of a full read on who's seeing what, when, how, and from whom. It also could be an interesting exercise in seeing other ways that people are communicating that we aren't presently. We've talked, we're pretty reliant on email, obviously, at this point. We're not so social media present, or so it might be interesting from an exploratory standpoint to see what some other people are doing. But I get that we don't want to overwhelm the process at this stage of the game. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, for me, Julie, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dennis.
My thought is to I don't know, it's not small because this is actually a lot of communication, but I think we should just focus on what we own and do that well. And then we can then dovetail in the community and other elements of communication that are happening. But I think we just need to get a hold of what we do first and make sure we own that and understand exactly what we're doing and what we're communicating. And then we can go out, and that to me, that's step 2, is to get the community. If we want to, but that's a future discussion.
So I would add, though, as an elementary school parent, there's a little bit of a blend. So if I look at, for example, my last PTO blast, there's some things that are very PTO, so like a Spiriteers meeting, book donation, PTO enrichment assembly. But there are other things that are very specific to the school: 5th grade trip to MMS, grades 3 to 5 strings musicians to DHS to see the Delete Quartet, 4th grade beginner band recital, trip to Museum of Darien.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a mix. So I think that I appreciate the point of being careful with community partners, but I think specifically in the case of PTO, I think at a minimum, we may want to identify what exists. I think there's some policies in place for what they do and don't publish. I know there are. I don't believe that the principals are any longer adding content to these. I believe that's been excised. But I think that the PTO blasts, particularly to the elementary school, but I think in all cases have a semi-official.
So I think we're saying the same thing though, because officially they're coming through the school. So
Yes.
whether
Okay.
the principal is literally blessing every week's update and so on, that's different, but they may or may not have an input in it. But that would come, we would just say simply that comes from homeschool, and the
Okay.
source is the
The
actual
PTO.
PTO.
Okay.
So I
The
think
PTOs don't have a database of
So
contacts.
I think we have room to actually include that
Okay.
in this format.
Okay. But what we're talking about then is anything kind of beyond that, that would be XYZ.
If I go to
Um,
Thrive in Youth this morning, if I go to like other organizations,
Okay.
that's what just going for like.
Right.
Okay.
Actually, I think it would be inappropriate because you'd be collecting. I just don't. It's unmanageable, really.
Okay,
If we,
That's all.
yes, like the YW and the Community Fund and all those other
Right, right.
organizations, right?
okay.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So this list, we should build this list of what currently exists. And then the next step is what the wish list may be. Is that kind of where we're going? Or
Yeah.
take it, this is an inventory, current inventory right now. That's the number one focus, first step, right? But then, we mentioned social media, we mentioned some emails, I look at Board of Education, there's things that I think we might want to add, but you don't want that in this list right now.
Actually, in the communication, I was thinking that we would include, because you do have on the right-hand side here of this column, the status currently in place
Oh,
and
okay. There you
discontinued.
go.
So I'm okay with, depends what if the board would like here to do it a different way or just stick to what is in place. That's fine too, but I'd be open with it. That's why the time will give me a wee bit of chance to meet with our groups and talk about, well, can we put something that we want to say? Well, yeah, take a wee bit of, I would encourage them to take a wee bit of a courage to do it. We don't have to agree with it. And somebody with the board, if they have some ideas, so the communication would encourage, if you'd like to see some things, then
Okay,
we would have
perfect.
that as a
Okay.
legacy.
I missed that last column. That's great. It's perfect.
Right. Maybe we call it proposed.
Yeah.
This isn't actionable. We aren't necessarily adding that because it's on this.
Correct.
Sheet.
I think of like publishing public comment emails as a proposal that the board would then have to adopt as a policy. It's just an idea, right?
Right.
Yeah, which is not listed here. Or it is a way of communication inbound, right? So
Right.
how do you list that as?
The other way to do it is just don't include possibilities, because we're having the survey, we're having focus groups, and to get so. It's,
I'm torn on that one. I can see it both ways. I think if people are looking for an opportunity to propose things, I think that's fine, and it can be sorted so those are separate from what exists.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort by that column. I guess my request would, can we just take a current inventory and then the next
Yeah.
step 1B would be
Propose.
propose
Yes.
some things, because the reason we started this committee, it's part of the reason is, there are certain ways that the board, there were certain instances where the board should have communicated as a board, and didn't have the opportunity, like we didn't have the venue. And I think of when there was a rumored resignation and there was much confusion over whether or not we had a board member resignation or not. And it created a bunch of stir in the community, and there was no way to communicate that there wasn't at the time, stuff like that. Because it wouldn't be appropriate from the admin to comment on that. And so I don't want to get too deep in the hole of specifics, but I have ideas of where we could create opportunities to communicate.
Okay. And I'll just take this opportunity in response to that. I did participate in a webinar last week that was titled "The Board's Role in Communications" that CABE offered. And it was great. It was mostly confirmation of the stuff that we're talking about. Clearly, there are a lot of districts that have communications committees these days. I think out of the pandemic, there's been kind of a heightened awareness of effective communication. And so it was a great discussion. Just a couple top line things to keep in mind as we talk about this is first, keeping that he started us with what our role is as a board. And we aren't really an organization for communication so much. So keeping our eye on what our responsibilities are. He did stress also the importance of listening, which I think is pretty key as we look through all of this stuff. We are trying to understand what our audience is trying to take in. But another thing that I thought, I feel like we've discussed this, but it's just good to keep in mind. Basically, if this group, we do our work successfully, we put ourselves out of business because we identify either the policies or the vehicles or the resources or whatever it is that collectively as a committee and then as a board as a whole and the administration together decide are the pieces that we need to put in place. But boards don't generally communicate much directly beyond meetings. Which is our number one venue. But there are ways to look at making our meetings more inclusive or more easily accessible. So we can talk about those things as well.
Definitely. Yeah, and I'm not saying we go rogue or anything.
No, I know you're not thinking you're going to write us a
circumstances.
newsletter once a
Yeah,
week,
no,
right?
no.
From the board. So thank you.
I have one more
Indulging me. Yeah.
more tactical question. Thank you, first of all, for that overview. I think that was super helpful. I appreciate that you went.
Great.
On the tactical side, we also have some, what I would also call semi-formal communications on social media like Twitter. So we have people who tweet either as professionals or in a semi-professional capacity. I don't know that we have school-sponsored Twitter accounts, but we do have people who tweet from their
Yes.
school role. So I just want to know if we are I assume we're intending to capture those sorts of things as well. So just wanted to clarify, though.
Well,
That's
that's the
semi-official. I
The
can,
short answer is yes, we will. But being able to sit down here and talk, let's say there's three high school administrators to have the discussion, exactly what you said. They said, well, the fact that Mark tweets, right, does that count? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Right? Because it will be from an assistant principal.
Yeah.
Yeah, during high school
Right,
athletics
right.
is, the perfect example, right? So.
okay.
So yes, I think that's important that we capture those.
Okay.
Dennis, do you have anything else? Are you good?
No, good.
Okay, so
So-
after
so-
the break,
So we'll send it out and
some
and bring it
instructions.
back organized for the April meeting.
okay, terrific.
So I'll just go, do you want me to just move on? Mr.
I
Chairman?
think so, yeah.
So the preliminary timeline, as you see it there, as part of the memorandum. So what we did, we modified this a little bit, and then we also tried to play out a wee bit of a research, step process. And, I'll just sort of explain this a little bit. What we're suggesting to do, and I think might be helpful before we even get to questions and so on, would be to establish a wee advisory team, and that would, Marge would oversee that. The chair here would like to sit on that, you're more than welcome. But this would be a small team just to guide our thinking around the construct of the survey. And just to be thought partner process, a team to guide it. Now, it's not a big, like, inclusive, it's just a little sort of oversight team just to guide the process a little bit. I'm suggesting that it says Panorama, it could be some other organization, but I can tell you that Panorama, who is a group affiliated just outside with Yale, they basically captured the market in Connecticut completely, and actually most of the country at this particular place. But I know it sounds, can we not do this ourselves? Honestly, I'm going to say, I don't have the time to do all of this with Marge, to be honest with you. And I do think a wee bit of objectivity and professionalism around it. Communication would be very helpful and insightful. This group will administer a survey, whatever it is we want, design the survey, administer the survey, collate the information, bring it back in a wee report. It's not a big task, but I would suggest that the advisory group work with Panorama and come up with what is it we want, and design that, administer it, come back with an evaluation of it, report back here to us, and do it professionally.
I think that makes sense to me. In my experience, good research, you go broad and then you focus, and you go broad and then you focus, and it's an iterative process to get to findings. But if we're going to broadly populate this and have something to start with, and then have a working team, it sounds like this
Mhm.
advisory team is kind of a small working group to help prepare the survey to then go broad again and get input from.
I think
a number of
the working
stakeholders.
group could also help us with the step of the focus groups and oversight of that. I do have here as part of the step that before it's administered, the design of the survey comes back to this committee, because it would seem that this, I think it would be a wee disconnect if something went wrong from a communication point of view. So even before it was administered, we would bring back what they're proposing and how they were proposed to
Right.
presented back, and then the report on the actual survey itself. So the focus groups, we said we would do by the fall. I think with the advisory team, I think we can essentially do those ourselves. I don't think that's, it may be challenging just organizing it a wee bit, but I don't think we need someone to actually assist us with that particular process. And so then we modified the next steps accordingly.
Just logistically, does that mean that we'll be doing the focus groups over the summer, or that we'll get
No.
them done during the fall? They'll
It'll be
completed by-
kicking off.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
completed by
I
the
think
fall.
that's more realistic.
Just doing those in the spring, just as a
Yeah.
tougher challenge.
And I appreciate that the board goals piece is included here. I know we're still talking about the timing on that, but I think it's important to have that as an overlay to what we're working on. And then my one other question would be, and I don't think it needs to be decided now, but if the survey process or the survey in its development phase needs to go to the board at large or not, but we can probably decide that.
I think if we're hiring Panorama, we'll need to talk to the board about that.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to have the board vet the survey as long as they're, I think it would be helpful. The board is welcome to watch this process,
Right.
you know, this committee meeting when
Right.
we review it. And if there's any concerns to, email.
To hear them.
You.
Yep.
But I think the primary purpose would have to be have the board authorize the work.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you for asking the question.
Thank you for the answer. Anybody have any other questions or thoughts on this? Dennis, you're good?
I'm good.
I think the timeline is reasonable, totally. I mean, again, when we look at priorities, what we need to do, this kind of is one, but it fits nicely, with everything else we have on our plates.
I think that sounds great, and I'm happy to be part of the working team or the advisory team. I don't mean to be renaming your team. Forgive me.
Right? Well, it'd be nice to have someone from the group.
That would be great.
Okay. I think that's terrific. Do we have anything else, or
I don't, Madam Chair, no, I don't.
okay, that's great. I will open it up to public comment. Michelle, I don't know if we have anybody.
Anyone in Zoom have public comment? Please use the raised hand option. There are no raised hands.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to dismiss. John, Jill,